Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Liam's First Look. And of course, we're talking about the UFC. It's back in your life. UFC 300 just went down, not last weekend, but the weekend prior. It was an excellent card. We cashed on Max Holloway, money line plus 200. We cashed on Max Holloway, ITD plus 950. So very exciting stuff. But we had a nice week off to decompress. Now it's right back at it. UFC Vegas 91. We got a fight card going down at the Apex Center. And this week, it's not a heavyweight card. It's not one of the things we normally complain about. It is a rare flyweight main event. We've got Alex Perez back in action after looking very good against Muhammad Mokaev, taking on Matheus Nicolau in his first UFC main event. He's a guy who's been around for a long time. I bet on him in the past, cashed on a very small underdog ticket against Manel Cap back in the day. And if you guys are not aware, this was supposed to be Manel Cap versus Matheus Nicolau in the main event of the evening. And unfortunately, Manel Cap, for the trillionth time in his UFC career, forced to pull out from the fight. Unfortunate news. So now what do we got instead? We got Alex Perez stepping up on short notice. And if you guys have been paying attention to the game for a long time, you know Alex Perez is a guy that isn't always reliable to make it to the scale, isn't always reliable to make it into the octagon, doesn't always make the weight class. So a couple things that we got to see, shake out here in terms of the weigh-in. There's a lot, to still develop over the course of the week. But you guys are here for the first look. So what do we always do on the first look? If you guys are new here, want to welcome you aboard. Say hi. My name's Liam. Hope you guys are having a great night. Hope this, episode finds you well. What we're going to do today, we're going to give our first look at the card. What that means is over the course of the week, I'm going to do more research. I'm going to do more tape study. We're going to come back to you on Thursday with much more developed opinions. But what I do have for you today is my first thoughts on the card. And so we've got an interesting card. We have some great fights to break down. And the way we always do it on the first look, we start at the main event and then we work our way on down the card. When you guys come back for bets and banter on Thursday later in the week, we start at the bottom and work our way on up. But this time we're going to start with this main event of the evening. So as I mentioned, Matheus Nicolau, why is he here? Why is he getting this main event spot? I can tell you guys, it's pretty straightforward. Matheus Nicolau, he's got an excellent professional record, right? That just jumps off the page at you, 19-3-1. Man, it's a solid record. Then you look and say to yourself, okay, well, how about at the UFC level? Has he been doing well in the UFC? Absolutely. 7-2 at the UFC level. And if we take a look at those results, he's got 2 stoppages, 1 knockout, 1 submission, 5 wins by decision. And both of his losses inside the organization came by way of knockout, unfortunately. So Matheus Nicolau, what do we know about the guy? Very talented. He's skilled in all positions, right? On the feet, he's not a very high volume striker. He tends to be a counter striker. He likes to move away, use some lateral footwork. He likes to circle on the outside. And when he can get you to commit to a strike, he wants to counter. He wants to throw a big overhand right. Typically, he likes to use his setups. He might throw a couple shots in combination, but then he likes to skirt back out of there, right? He does not like to be in extended combinations and exchanges because that's where he can get clipped. I think his chin is the most vulnerable part of his game. Even that fight against Manel Cap, that was a close split decision. I cashed that ticket. I felt very fortunate to cash that ticket. I thought it was a very close fight. And I thought that what we saw from, Nicolau is he's crafty. He's dangerous in all positions. He had a beautiful guillotine entry in that fight as well. I think he would have finished lesser opponents than Manel Cap, who is like a title challenger level opponent. And when you have a guy like Matheus Nicolau, he's got to find ways to fight that hide his vulnerabilities. Because if you look, it's kind of bookends on his career, right? He gets to the UFC, and his first fight is a decision win over Luis Smolka. He beat John Moraga at the Ultimate Fighter finale as well, split decision. And then he fights Dustin Ortiz with a head of momentum, and he gets knocked out in the first round. Big head kick, big follow-up ground and pound shots from Dustin Ortiz. Pretty brutal stoppage. Then he gets cut from the promotion, and he goes back to Future FC. He gets a win over Felipe Efrain in Brave FC. Then he comes back, and the fight I mentioned with Manel Cap, he gets the win via split decision. Then he goes on to fight Tim Elliott, gets a unanimous decision win. I thought he looked pretty good in that fight. Tim Elliott, obviously a savvy veteran, but he doesn't have the knockout power to necessarily test a guy like Nicolau. Then you look at David Dvorak, another guy who's not really known for his stopping power, for his big knockout ability. So I think that those were forgiving matchups. The Manel Cap fight, that was a brutal matchup. And the fact that Matheus Nicolau survived that does tell you he can even go out there and beat a power puncher. But you think about the prospect of him doing it over 5 rounds with that chin, it does become a little bit sketchy, and he's got to really manage his fight and pick his moments. As for the Matt Schnell fight, I mean, with all due respect, Matt Schnell is probably the most chinny flyweight in the UFC. Shannon Ross is maybe the most chinny flyweight in the history of mixed martial arts, but currently on the UFC roster as it's constructed, I would think that Matt Schnell's right up there with a guy who's very solid, very talented, just doesn't have the chin to back it up necessarily, the durability to go out there and be in these hard, sustained gunfights. So when I'm looking at a matchup like this, I say to myself, man, you got a guy in Matheus Nicolau, 5-0 career to the submission, right? He's got a very good ground game. I think that Perez is well versed on the ground. We've seen that, right? He went out there with Mikhaev last time, looked very competent in his wrestling, in his grappling, in his techniques. But we also know that, 5-0 to the sub doesn't tell you he's going to go out there and get it every time. His one submission win in the UFC was a Japanese necktie over Bruno Correa in the 3rd round back in 2015, coming off the Ultimate Fighter. Bruno Correa, it never really worked out for him at the UFC level. So, there's just a couple of things that stand out to me as a little bit concerning here. 3 first-round losses, all via knockout. Pedro Nobre back in 2012 was able to take out Matheus Nicolau. You kind of just wash that one away. But then we talk about the fact that Dustin Ortiz was able to clip him. Okay, Dustin Ortiz no longer with the promotion, but a solid fighter. You give him a little bit of a pass there. Most recently, Brandon Royval, guy who's going to challenge for the title type of guy, a guy who's certainly right at that title level. And Royval was able to catch him with that knee very early on. Brutal finish, hurt him, dropped him, rocked him, landed big follow-up ground and pound. So I think the pattern that we're seeing emerge is that Matheus Nicolau can be hurt on the feet. He can be rocked on the feet. But barring that, he's a pretty talented guy. I think the way you'd have to beat Matheus Nicolau more often than not, if you don't knock him out, is you're going to have to win a very close tactical split decision, because I don't think he's going to give you a ton of opportunities. I think if the fight goes the full 15 or 25, it means that Nicolau spent a lot of time skirting the octagon, moving his feet, not engaging in the pocket, finding his moments, using, his little chip shot jab and some movement. But now let's talk about the other side of this matchup, because Alex Perez definitely gets a lot of grief. If you've been a MMA fan only for a couple of years, you've never seen this guy win a fight. Most of the time you're seeing this guy pull out of fights, not make it to the booking, not have an answer, when his name is called. But when you're looking at Alex Perez, let's just look at the losses for him recently. And we'll take out any grappling matches that have taken place. He's got Muhammad Mikhaev. He fought him in March of this year. So maybe 6 weeks ago, something like that, 6 or 7 weeks ago, Alex Perez was out there fighting Mikhaev, and I didn't think he took a lot of damage. I did think he looked like, he came out of that fight pretty healthy. So hats off to him, more power to him. Mikhaev was not feeling well for that fight. And allegedly, right, he was sick. He wasn't feeling well. So he went out there and just eked out a decision, did enough to get the job done. Very, very close fight. I thought rounds 2 and 3 were particularly close. And so shout out to Alex Perez going out there, putting on a solid fight, finally making it to the cage. And he did everything right. I believe he even made weight for that contest. Then he has the Pantoja fight. Listen, Pantoja is the current champion. Everybody likes the guy. Everybody respects the guy. And if he gets to that rear naked choke position, he's going to finish most guys in the division. He's going to finish a lot of people in the sport. And that tends to be the fatal flaw, if you will, of Alex Perez, right? You go look at the guy's record. He's 7-5 career to the submission. So unlike Matheus Nicolau, 5-0 career to the submission, you got 7-5 for Alex Perez career to the submission. So is he inept? Is he incompetent? Does he not have an ability to get submission wins? No, he absolutely does. We saw him go out there and submit Jordan Espinosa with an arm triangle choke in the first round. I posted that video up on Twitter earlier today. Then you look, back in the day, Carlos John de Tomas, back in 2017, he was able to Darce choke him. He was able to submit Kevin Gray on the Contender Series in 2017 with that Anaconda choke as well to earn his way into the UFC. So Alex Perez definitely has some submission offense. But then you got to think about the submission defense. I think that's the big difference between these two guys on the mat. I think Matheus Nicolau is a little more sound. I think he's a little more positional. I think he's a little more educated with his jiu-jitsu. I think that Alex Perez, on the other hand, is very solid. He can scramble. but he's also prone to making a little bit more basic mistakes. I think he's a little bit more limited in his knowledge. I think that his ability to compete is still very high level. So, a path for Matheus Nicolau here is definitely the submission. He is an excellent submission grappler. I think it would be wise for him to try and not engage this fight on the feet for as long as he can and to keep it on the mat where he could potentially present an advantage. We have seen other guys get to Perez on the mat. So if we go back through the record, let's just go look through. It was Pantoja with the rear naked choke. Makayev out-wrestled him to a close decision. Davison Figueiredo finished him with the guillotine choke after a brilliant series. Again, another thing that I tweeted out, guys, at Liam Picks Fights, Figgy, the guy's guillotine sequence, it's just unbelievable because he starts with a leg lock entry when he's going against Alex Perez. And when he was able to get, him knocked off balance and get him to the ground, both hands posted, he was able to then come up and find the finish in transition. Perez was doing some of the right things, trying to scramble, trying to move, and he got caught in an arming guillotine that he had no chance to recover from. So, excuse me. Well, I got to give the credit and respect there to, Davison Figueiredo, who, speaking of UFC 300, just went out there and submitted Cody Garbrandt, 135-pound champion. I don't believe he'd ever been submitted before in his career, if my memory serves. So, obviously, Figueiredo is extremely talented. Then a ground-and-pound finish for Joseph Benavidez. That fight, for whatever reason, does not stand out to me, in my memory bank, but I believe Joseph hurt him on the feet, if my memory serves there. Then you have the armbar loss back in 2016 at the Tachi Palace fights. He lost via prayer choke guillotine against Adam Antolin. Couple guillotine losses earlier in his career as well. So seems like one position where he's particularly vulnerable is that guillotine. You guys know me. I'm a sucker for a good guillotine choke, and I think that Matheus Nicolau has a very good guillotine choke. I do not think that Alex Perez wants to engage, in the grappling here. I think if I'm Alex Perez and I'm in his corner, if I'm coaching Alex Perez, I'm telling him, hey, listen, man, you got real good skills with the takedown defense, especially that first layer. You start to extend some of the exchanges. You start to put him in some worse positions, or you catch him in a transitional sub. He can make some mistakes, but he's got pretty good ideas about how to disengage, how to break these clinches a little bit, and how to defend that first layer entry on the takedown. And I think that if he's able to defend some takedowns here, Alex Perez is not as sharp as a guy like Nicolau. He's maybe not as crafty, but he throws a decent volume on the feet. He'll go out there and attempt some strikes. If he feels like he's got you breaking, he will unload with a combination. He'll try and get, a series of punches going in a row. We've also seen him go out there and secure leg kick finishes in the UFC. Not a very common occurrence, but this guy goes out there and slaps the calf, man. He's willing to go out there, throw a lot of leg kicks, try and pick away at your calf. He's willing to do, a number on you over time, right? He's willing to pick away slow and steady, bing, bing, just chip away at that calf and eventually take you out of the fight. That's been a trademark move for Alex Perez in the UFC. If we go back and refer to his record, his most recent win in the UFC, a leg kick stoppage over former title challenger Jussier Formiga. And then we also saw him go out there and stop Jose Torres at the time, an undefeated fighter, 8-0. He was able to stop him with strikes on the feet as well. So he's a guy that's got, an interesting game. He's got skills in all positions, but he hasn't been supremely active. He's 6-4 in the promotion, so not as clean and prestigious a record as a guy like Matheus Nicolau. But you also got to acknowledge he's been fighting some of the highest level guys in the division, the Pantojas, the Figueiredos, the Makayevs, even the Benavidez. When Benavidez was around, he was a top guy in the division. So I think that there's a lot. Oh, shout out to Nan Dalal. I hope I pronounced that right. My brother, sharpest chat in the game. Thank you for being here. He says Benavidez hit AP with the legal strikes and a cheeky nodder. Hey, the Jack Slack special, the old cheeky nodder, little headbutt. Henry Cejudo used to go for those a little bit as well. Hey, all's fair in love and war, right? And I think that unfortunately it's the way that it goes sometimes with these guys that like to do that blitz style. They can clash heads a little bit. And I think that for Perez, the way he wins this fight is he pressures forward. He puts Nicolau on the back foot. He makes him second guess himself. He uses that veteran savvy and that experience. And he goes out there and puts some hands on this kid and some really hard low kicks and tries to catch him out of stance and catch him out of position. The one thing we got to note is if you want to be like a Matheus Nicolau and be evasive in the pocket and use a lot of evasive footwork, trying to skirt around the outside of the octagon. Every style has pros and cons, right? And one of the cons with that style, we saw it with Dominic Cruz against the aforementioned Henry Cejudo. The last thing to leave range always is your leg, right? Because if you're trying to propel yourself in another direction, you have to push off your leg. And so oftentimes, if you have a really good low kicker, they can try and target your leg as you're leaving range. And you've kind of left your leg behind trying to skirt away to the open space. So I do think that that's something that we want to watch for here is if Perez has a good game plan, and it's hard to know what his game plan is going to look like, right? 6 weeks to prepare for the fight. But, he does know how to throw low kicks. We know that about him. He's got good boxing fundamentals for the most part. We know that about him. So I think that he could go out there and, use his combination striking to get some advantages on Matheus Nicolau. But I think that if he allows this to be a low tempo cardio kickboxing match, I just think Nicolau's a little bit cleaner, a little bit more technical, might land a couple big counter right hands, off balance his opponent. That could create some submission opportunities as well, potential club and sub. So overall, I think that Nicolau has some decent strikes, but I don't expect him to stop a guy like Perez, who I do think is durable, who I think is tough in the striking. I think his quick positions, the things that break him are when he gets caught in spots where he feels like he can't get out. He feels constricted. He feels, wrapped up. That's what a guillotine's like. It's like somebody's trying to rip your damn head off. And I think that for, Nicolau, he's trying to rip this guy's head off. He's trying to get him to the ground. He's trying to put him in a vice grip. He's trying to expose his ground game. And I think that for Perez, you're trying to keep this fight upright, sprawl, brawl, pressure, back this kid up, and put some hands on him. And I just don't know what to make of this one yet. I feel like from a gut level standpoint, I can't bet on a guy like Nicolau at significant shock, given what I know about his chin. Given the way I've seen him, go to some close decisions with top guys in this division. I don't know that he could justify that big price for me. 65%. That's a big ask against another elite fighter. And I think Alex Perez did look elite last time out against Makhachev. Maybe Makhachev's just way overrated, right? But Makhachev was one fight away from a title shot, right? You understand that if he finished Alex Perez, we're not having a Steve Ursay conversation, right? Makhachev gets the title shot in Brazil if he had finished in his most recent fight. So I think Perez kind of went out there and made a better account of himself than the matchmakers expected, than Makhachev expected, certainly than I expected as well. So I think that Alex, it's good for him to get back in there so quick. When you've got a guy that has been struggling with inactivity, that hasn't been able to get inside the cage, that hasn't been able to keep that, weight loss regimen, the championship lifestyle, I think frequency of activity is huge. So Alex Perez showing that discipline, that willingness to get back in there, it could be one of two things. It could be, I'm here for a check. I don't care. I'll put myself in suboptimal conditions, take the fight on short notice. Doesn't matter to me. Or it could be, hey, I'm staying in shape. I'm ready to compete right now. I want my opportunities and I'm willing to take them even if they're on short notice. I mean, this is a guy that, again, overperformed, I would say, last time out as an underdog. Looked like it could have been, darn near a pick 'em price, right? Very close fight. Obviously, Makhachev maybe a slight favorite, but when you look at how it played out, Perez did better than people thought. And Matheus Nicolau last time out is coming off a brutal knockout loss. Let's not mistake it, right? He's coming off a loss where he got brutally kneed, hit with a big shot, dropped. And it kind of exposed that even though he's gotten better, even though he's been making some improvements, even though he's got real skills in all positions, we saw it happen, a long time ago, right? Where he got knocked out by Dustin Ortiz pretty brutally early on. And then we saw the same thing against Pedro Nobert on the regional scene before that. And then we saw it again. It's like, it's always been the same problem. Getting knocked out in the first round, getting clipped, getting hit with big shots and getting put down. And he does a lot of dipping into his stance, right? Because the one other thing I'll mention about Nicolau is loading up that right hand for the counter is brilliant when it works. But when it doesn't work, you kind of see times where, Nicolau is just loaded up with his whole body crouched down. And that's where he got hit with the knee from Royval. That's where he gets hit, with Dustin Ortiz throwing that high kick up at him. So there's just been a couple of times where he kind of like sits into a posture where it allows people to land big shots on him. And I think that for Nicolau, that's what he's got to be very disciplined about in this fight, is making sure he's either all the way in or all the way out of range, that he's able to use that lead hand to keep some space. When he's loading up the right hand, he's got to make it count. He's got to land those shots and get out of the way. So I think it's a fascinating fight. I lean towards it being a dogger pass situation on the money line right now. but I have no bets on the fight. If I had to lean towards what I would consider betting in this spot, I think I would consider betting, the underdog in the main event. I think I would consider betting the fight ends by submission, or particularly that Nicolau by submission prop. I think that both guys have a path, but I think Nicolau is clearly a much better grappler. For Perez, I think it would have to be a club and sub type situation. I think you would have to get Nicolau a little bit, flustered, out of sorts, so to speak. And shout out to the chat. Let's see what the chat has to say about this great main event, guys. We got Daz Dillinger says, if Alex was a pressure fighter or had heavy hands, I'd consider taking him. But like I said, he's shit. Alex has had a lot of injuries too. I'm pretty sure that's why he's had long gaps between fights. He's had some injuries. He's had some personal stuff. He's been building businesses. He's had a lot of different things. But I do think that he still showed a very serious skill set in his last fight. And I think that for Nicolau, he's got a lot of skills. He is a guy that the UFC would like to get behind, but they've tried to get behind him before, right? They tried to put him in winnable situations, give him great opportunities. I thought he was a better grappler than Brandon Royval. We never got to see it play out, right? Because he got starched pretty quick. So I think that he's got clear, hard to overcome flaws about his durability, right? Because at the end of the game, it's the hurt business. And if you can't take a good shot, it's hard to fight. It's hard to fight, especially at a really high professional level. So that's one thing I'm taking away here. Shout out to Holly in the chat. We don't always get female viewers here, Holly, so we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you. Good luck, man. Good luck to you too, Holly. Thank you so much. Shout out to the Hitman in the chat. Says Liam, late night, love it. Absolutely, brother. Wanted to get going a little bit earlier today, but unfortunately we were not able to because I had a little bit of technical difficulties. It wouldn't be my show if there wasn't technical difficulties, but we still made it. We're on the air and we're happy to be here. So thank you so much. Shout out to Kadeem, says brewing coffee. You know that we got one coffee right here in the Coffee and Jiu-Jitsu Brewing Confidence on the mats mug. We've got the odds mug stacked with coffee. So we're absolutely stacked and prepared. Shout out to Kadeem, says Liam, the man himself, salute. It's a salute to you, my brother. Shout out to Avery, says hello from Georgia. Hello, Georgia. Welcome aboard. Thank you for being here, my friend. Shout out to Eden Roos is laying this foundations for what we're going to talk about next. As Spann about to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory once again. He's talking, of course, about the co-main event of the evening. Shout out to Nandalaw Rasaya, says Nicolau winning and losing ITD on that leaping lead hook. You're absolutely right. He takes a lot of risks with that. We've got Joshua Frick says, what's up, Liam? What's up, Joshua? Thank you for being here. Kalashram says, Karine Silva via submission is the lock of the week. Oh, my. Shout out to Kalashram putting it on the table early. So there you go. Shout out to Greenbelt Warrior, says Liam is for the West Coasters. We're rocking on the East Coast all night long, baby. So our West Coast brethren, our West Coast friends, welcome aboard. Thank you guys for being here. The man, the myth, the legend. You're far too kind, my brother. Mason in the building. Dylan says, dumb question. How do we know AP has better cardio? Yeah, I'm not even saying he does have better cardio. I think he's got more experience in 5-round fights and booked 5-round fights, as in a title fight. He's been scheduled for 5-round main events before. He's been scheduled for title fights, right? So 5-round title fights. Even if they end in the first round, they're scheduled to go 5 hard 5s. So I'm sure he put in the camps, had the preparation for that. But yeah, it is an open question. I would say a little bit for both of these guys because Perez just hasn't had, long, extended, difficult fights. But I would say that Makayev fight was a sign that he's moving in the right direction. Thought he looked cardiovascular. His cardiovascular preparation was on point for that fight. And I thought he actually may have looked like the fresher guy late in the fight. So great question, and I appreciate it. If you guys have more questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and fire them off in the chat. And if we don't get to them live on the air, no problem. Go ahead and fire them off in the comment section down below. Try and get back to you guys as soon as possible. And I appreciate all the comments, all the feedback, whether it's positive, negative, indifferent. I appreciate what you guys have to say about the show. So thank you for contributing. Shout out to Northender, says Big Liam putting in the work. Appreciate you, Northender. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for showing up. And shout out to Jordan Fowler from New Zealand. Shout out to New Zealand. Shout out to our Aussies. Shout out to everybody in the Oceanic region. We appreciate you being here. God bless. And you guys got your own title shot coming up soon in UFC 301. So Exciting stuff, guys. Exciting stuff. But let's move on to the next fight here, because we got a co-main event of the evening, and it's a little bit surprising, right? You see a guy like Bogdan Guskov, and he comes into the UFC. He's on a main card billing. He's fighting Volkan Ozdemir, and he's about a plus 145 underdog, right? He comes out and he's throwing hands. They're both landing big shots. Volkan was wearing it on his face a little bit. Then all of a sudden, boom, Volkan, no time Ozdemir lands that big shot, hurts him bad. He actually lands a beautiful takedown before this. I should mention, he lands a beautiful takedown. Bogdan Guskov worked back up to his feet. I was impressed. I was a little bit surprised. And then you see all of a sudden, right, he gets clipped with a big shot. He gets taken down again, and then he gets finished on the ground. UFC debut, goes up in flames as a plus 145 dog, but I thought he showed some signs of promise, right? He went out there. He was willing to attempt his offense. He was very aggressive, and he was landing some good shots. The problem was he was there to be hit. He had that UFC jitter. He was out there throwing a couple shots, looking like he was, on a highway, staring at headlights. My man was just, feeling the moment a little bit. And Volkan Ozdemir, not a soft landing in your UFC debut, but I thought he was capable of winning that fight. And I think he showed it in the fight, despite losing it, right? He went out there, he showed some of his promise, but ultimately he was overcome by a better, more experienced fighter on the night. Next up, they move him to the preliminary card. They give him Zach Pauga, and he is once again installed as an underdog, this time about a plus 110 dog on the money line, and he goes out there and delivers Zach Pauga in the first round, knockout, brutal fashion, left him lying on the canvas, standing over him, shouting, and he looked like he still wanted to fight that night. Bogdan Guskov shows up ready to fight. I think his biggest concern, his biggest flaw, potentially, is his chin. I just don't think he's got a great chin. I think his ground game is a little bit suspect. I think he makes some bad decisions on the mat at times. And I think that pure technique for technique, Ryan Spann is probably a better technical grappler than a guy like Bogdan Guskov. But again, back to the positive qualities of Guskov, I think he's a really dangerous guy. I think he's a really aggressive guy. And I think you got to put him out, or you've got to put him in a choking position, to get one over on him. I think that in this spot, you got a guy like Ryan Spann, and he looks like he should win every UFC fight. He's built big, strong, long, athletic. He's got some speed on his punches. But for me, he's not a very natural fighter at all. A lot of what he does is extremely wild and reckless. I think he puts himself in a position to fail way more often than I would be comfortable with, especially considering the price tag that you're being asked to pay for the privilege. About a minus 200, a little over 65%. And we're talking about a guy who just invites a lot of risk. I thought he had knocked out Johnny Walker 2 or 3 times in a fight that he ends up getting knocked out in the first round. He kept landing all these big shots, but the finishing instincts were so poor. And he's throughout his career struggled with, putting himself in terrible positions when he's grappling. The guy's got an excellent guillotine, and he's basically won all of his fights that he's ever won via submission using that guillotine or a rear naked choke popping out on somebody's back. He's a long guy. Like I mentioned, he's got limb length. He can go out there, strangle people. But outside of that, I've just seen this guy make so many boneheaded decisions on the mat. He's going against Nikita Krylov. He ends up in the top position and gets triangled almost instantly. He's going with Anthony Smith, and Anthony Smith is out there, passing around to his back, getting on top of him, putting him in some really terrible positions. And he's also just very hittable for a light heavyweight. This guy has fought a pretty meager level of competition throughout his run in the UFC. And basically the way his fights have broken down is his best win in the UFC is Dominic Reyes, I would say by a country mile, right? A guy who fought for the title. He knocked him out in the first round. But outside of that, there's really not a standout win, I feel, on Ryan Spann's resume. He's fought a lot of guys that are very average in the UFC and barely eked out wins. He was minus 400 against Smiling Sam Alvey, and he ends up eking out a close split decision in that spot. And you look at a guy like Bogdan Guskov, he's typically kill or be killed. He's got an ability to knock people out. He's got an ability to submit people, but mostly he's a knockout artist. And mostly he's going to look to go out there and crack people in the first 1 or 2 rounds. But we also have to remember, that Ryan Spann, despite having power, despite having some submission ability, he's been finished, I want to say 6 times in the UFC or something crazy. Like, let me just pull up the record because I don't want to speak out of my ass. But Ryan Spann is 21-9 overall as a professional. He's been finished 3 times, in the UFC. It's 6 times overall as a professional. He's been finished. So Anthony Smith beat him via split decision. Anthony Smith also submitted him in the very first round via rear naked choke. Nikita Krylov submitted him in the very first round via triangle choke. Johnny Walker knocked him out in the very first round using elbows and hammer fists. Carl Roberson knocked him out in the very first round using elbows. And he's been elbowed several times to a defeat. Oftentimes he's shooting a double leg. He gets complacent. Saif Saud is losing his mind, having an aneurysm on the side. Move, Ryan, move. No, Ryan. And he doesn't move, and he gets TKO'd there. Anyway, so when you look at those spots, he's a very frustrating guy, and he's not a guy I feel like I trust at the price tag. Also, you just got to think that light heavyweight's a little bit volatile overall. Ryan Spann, he's got these things on paper that make him look good. He's fast. He's got the UFC experience. He's got some length. He's got some height. But then you go back and look, and it's like Carl Roberson's tiny compared to Spann. He's still able to knock him out in the first round. Nikita Krylov was kind of getting horsed around a little bit in that fight, was still able to find the submission. Then you look, who is Ryan Spann beating? Let's go through the list of wins because I said I wasn't altogether very impressed. He came in overweight, I believe, for the Dominic Reyes fight, and he won that fight via knockout in the first round. But hey, hats off to him. No problem there. Then he goes out there and he submits Ion Cutelaba in the first round, and Ion Cutelaba is 6-9 in the UFC. So I don't really rate that as a win. Like, Ion Cutelaba is a below average UFC fighter, period, point blank. Then you look at, I mentioned the Anthony Smith fight. He lost that fight. He beat Misha Serkinov via TKO in the first round. Misha Serkinov went on a horrible run to end his career, 4 straight losses. And he also ended his UFC career 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2-7 in his last 9 UFC fights. Like, Misha Serkinov was just not in a great place, and I don't really rate that win either. He beat Smilin Sam Alvey, who is now in Karate Combat. He beat Devin Clark, who is another guy who's very flaky, 8-9 in the promotion, so a losing record in the UFC. He beat the ghost of Antonio Nogueira. No disrespect to the legend, but that was a far past his due date legend in that fight. He beat Luis Henrique via decision, no longer with the promotion, and Emmanuel Sordi on the Contender Series. I mean, these are just not high-level fighters. So, yeah, I mean, he's done a decent job, but he doesn't strike me as a guy that's like, super reliable, super consistent. And, I did mention this to the patrons earlier, but I'll mention this to everybody, give a little free game to everybody because I noticed it myself. And I thought it was an interesting trend. But Ryan Spann was favored last time out to beat Anthony Smith, and he lost that fight. He was an underdog in the 6 fights prior. So it's just, interesting to see the market, kind of feel like, hey, he got robbed a little bit in his last fight. So now he's a -200 favorite in this fight against a younger guy who's probably a little bit more dynamic than Smith. It just seems a little bit interesting to me. So, yeah, I lean towards a dogger pass situation. The under is like -250, disgusting. I lean towards it going under, but it's just not a price that I feel there's any value on. So, yeah, I think that it's a fun fight, an interesting fight. Let's see what the chat has to say about it. But I'm leaning towards a dogger pass situation. I think somebody could get submitted in this one as well. Norashi says where Lord of the Rings was made. Shout out. Daz Dillinger says, big ups on Ryan Garcia too. That ref was on some BS. You are not lying, my brother. I'm at a point where I can never bet Spann at chalk again, says Kadeem, and I tend to agree with you. Hitman says +170 is good enough for me to fade Ryan Spann. Blessings, my brother. Good luck to you. SD Crusader says Spann is a 50-50 fighter. I tend to agree with the sentiments of the chat today. Daz also says Ryan is a bit of a mental midget, but I'll admit if he goes straight to his grappling, I reckon he can make it look easy. I think there's a path to that, but I also think, Spann is averaging like 1 point something takedowns per 15 minutes. I don't know how good he is as a top player. I think he takes a lot of unnecessary risks and kind of gets out of position at times, but he's definitely a big body. You don't want him on top of you. He can be a dangerous guy to deal with from that position. So That's a great point, Daz. But there we have it. I'm leaning towards a dogger pass co-main event situation, but admittedly, highly volatile fight in the light heavyweight division. Next up, guys, we got the talk of the town, the talk of the Twitter streets. We've got Karine Silva taking on Ariane Lipski, and this is Killer Karine taking on the Queen of Violence. So we got a very violent featured bout in the women's side of the game, and this fight is going to be going down at 115 pounds, I believe. Let me just confirm that. I'm lying to you guys. It is at flyweight, 125 pounds in this matchup, and I believe this line flipped. Let me bring up the odds to see if this line has indeed flipped. So we are just using the Bet Online number because they tend to be market makers in this regard. So Bet Online opens minus 105, Ariane Lipski. The line shoots out to minus 145, Lipski. And now the line is at plus 132, Lipski. Almost a complete flip on the line. So obviously, guys, there's been a lot of market activity here. We saw early money come in on Lipski. We saw more money come in on the Karine Silva side, so much so that it flipped. And potentially there was some manipulation going on in that early market. Maybe some people wanted better plus money on the Silva side. But in any case, if you liked Silva at plus money, that is gone, gone, gone. It looks like Silva now best price about minus 150. Excuse me, that you're going to do in the market. Maybe a minus 146, minus 145. But you're not doing much better than that. And let's bring up our friends at Fight Numbers and get the best available market prices on these. So I wanted to look at the odds history there, but we'll just do a quick plug for Fight Numbers. I love this tool, right? They have a UFC odds screen where you can toggle the best available odds on all of the different fights. So instead of looking at a big screen where your eyes go, glazed over, just shows you the best price on each fight. So we'll discuss the lines for the fights that we've already talked about real quick, and then keep pushing it forward. So first and foremost, let's take a look here. We've got the main event of the evening. Best available prices. We're quoting from Bet Online. And again, this is according to our friends over at fightnumbers.com. If you're looking for more information, it's right down in the description box below. And if you're looking to try it out for yourself, go ahead and use my promo code Liam. They'll hook you up with a 50% discount on that first subscription. So appreciate you guys. But in any case, plus 158 for Alex Perez on Bet Online, minus 183 for Matheus Nicolau, the favorite. As for the Ryan Spann Bogdan Guskov fight, we got Bogdan Guskov sitting at a plus 170 over at Bet Online. Meanwhile, on Borgata Sportsbook, I believe that is an MGM clone. We've got minus 190 on Borgata Sportsbook. That's available in New Jersey. I know. So, there you have it on the main and co-main event of the evening. Now the fight that we're discussing, the fight at hand, best available price on Karine Silva. You're looking at FanDuel Sportsbook, minus 146, and the best available comeback on Ariane Lipski, plus 132. So that is a Bet Online number. And, Bet Online, again, opened at minus 105, went all the way to minus 145. Now they're back at plus 132, best available market price on Ariane Lipski. So what are we dealing with here, guys? We got a great fight in the women's division. You got two women that have both gone out there and shown that they're capable of competing at this level. With Ariane Lipski, I felt like she had a lot of unrealized potential. She's 6-5 in the UFC, not a stellar record. But if you look, her last three fights, she's rattled off victories in all three, beat JJ Aldrich via unanimous decision, beat Melissa Gatto via split decision, and then armbarred Casey O'Neill in a fight where she was frankly whooping her ass prior to that finish. So a lot of good showings for Ariane Lipski in a row. And it basically came on the heels of she got knocked out by Priscilla Cachoeira. I believe she started training thereafter with Amanda Nunes. She's now being coached by her husband. I don't know if she's still affiliated in any way with Amanda Nunes, but what I can say based on my Instagram research is she's being trained by her husband. Her husband, I believe, is a black belt in Muay Thai from Shoot Box, and he is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from Checkmat. This is all off the top of my head, so if I fudge a detail here or there, I apologize, but I did send this all to patrons, and I did catalog this information myself, to do a free write about the entire fight card. And so when I'm looking at that, I say to myself, man, Ariane Lipski, she's got the same strength and conditioning coach that Ian Gary has been working with. It seems like she's invested in that portion of her game. As for her jiu-jitsu, her grappling, she's been working with the daughter of Wagner Rocha. Wagner Rocha being a very serious Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitor, and a former MMA fighter as well. So I think that, she's trying to do a lot of things right to position herself, to be a good fighter. She's on the strength of a 3-fight win streak, so she's got some momentum. She's got people that care about her in her corner. But, let's talk about the losses, right? She got knocked out in the first round by Priscilla Cachoeira. She got ground and pound finished in round 2 by Montana De La Rosa. I mean, that's a really bad indictment of your ground game, with no disrespect. Montana De La Rosa has just one win via TKO in the UFC, and I believe it was that fight. That was the only fight. And by the way, in her last UFC fight, so if we exclude the grappling matches, Montana De La Rosa lost to JJ Aldrich via decision. She lost to Tatiana Suarez via guillotine choke. She lost to Macy Barber via decision. She beat Ariane Lipski. She went to a draw with Mayra Buena Silva. She lost to Viviane Araújo. She beat Mara Barella, and she lost to Andrea Lee. I mean, she's been on a terrible run, is basically the bottom line. So she loses to Montana De La Rosa via stoppage. That's not a great look. She loses to zombie girl Priscilla Cachoeira via stoppage, and that's not a great look, right? Priscilla Cachoeira just got absolutely mugged by Jasmine Jasudavicius, got absolutely mugged by Miranda Maverick, got mugged by Jillian Robertson, had to try and gouge her eyes out to survive there. And she only has 2 finished wins in the UFC, and they were against Gina Mazzani and Ariane Lipski. And you do not want to be in the company of Gina Mazzani, right? When we're talking about fight credentialing. And, we respect her for getting in the octagon, but just not a stellar addition to the roster, in my humble opinion. And you look at, Ariane Lipski, the wins are fine, but the losses are really glaring. Antonina Shevchenko, another woman who's not very high level on the ground, dominating her on the ground, finishing via ground and pound. So her chin, maybe a little bit questionable. Her durability, a little bit questionable. She's been TKO'd 4 times, I want to say, in her career. That is accurate. She is 6-4 career to the knockout, and she's 4-0 career to the submission. So never been submitted, but her only submission win of note is the Casey O'Neill submission and the Luana Carolina submission. I would say that other than that, she does not have many notable wins. The other thing I'll give her credit for, and the reason I said untapped potential for Lipski, is she had a win over Silvana Gomez Juarez on the regional scene, a girl who went on to fight in the UFC. She was a KSW featured fighter. She's got the most Instagram followers, guys, of any fighter on this card. Shout out to my guy Dixon. I think he's probably asleep right now because I haven't seen him active in the chat. But what I can say is the OnlyFans fade is active here on the Ariane Lipski side. So she is an OnlyFans fighter. However, she's posting training footage. She's posting things like that. She's not, putting out this, adult content. And she is training with her husband, right? So it looks like she's very serious, got a team behind her, got a whole group trying to prepare her for success. But she does have a very difficult opponent here. So she's got 11 UFC fights under her belt. She's got 5 KSW fights under her belt. She's obviously very experienced. But on the other side here, you got Karine Silva. Talk about momentum. She's got momentum as well. Both these women are on 3-fight win streaks in the UFC. The difference is Karine Silva, guys, is on an 8-fight win streak overall. Okay? So Karine Silva was on a nice win streak coming into the UFC. But the one thing I would say that we want to just throw up a little pause about this girl is, number one, she's been finished a couple times, right? So if we look at the record, 9-2 career to the submission. So excellent career record to the submission, very lethal, very deadly, much more so than Ariane Lipski. However, we know that both these women are opportunistic submission hunters. The one thing is, we've seen Silva get submitted twice. She got submitted by Marina Moroz the first time they fought. She just avenged that one in devastating fashion. The last time that she was able to get her hands on Marina, she went on to submit Marina in the first round, ironically. But then you look at the Marina Makintekina fight, where she gets submitted via knee bar in the very first round. We know that Ariane Lipski actually has a knee bar win in the UFC. It's a rare submission to pull off. So I do find that notable. That was all the way back in 2017. But then she had a 2-year layoff. She comes back in 2019 and she takes on, and by the way, that fight I should mention was at bantamweight. This is at flyweight. She lost another fight at bantamweight. And since then, She's been competing more often in these catchweight bouts, 130. She did do a couple bouts at 135, but then flyweight on the Contender Series, flyweight in all 3 of her UFC bouts. She's made weight every time, and she's been devastating so far. First round submission of Marina Moroz. Beautiful guillotine choke. Great fundamentals. Ketlen Souza. Knee bars are in the first round. Guys, I think it was like a Z-lock or something like that. My jiu-jitsu, when it comes to the leg lock game, is not as technical as some other guys, right? You might want to ask Jewish better exactly what happened in that exchange. But what I can say is she completely destroyed the knee of Ketlen Souza, who's somebody we're going to talk about later on the card. But it looked horrific visually. She, destroyed the knee, it looked like. So this girl, Killer is a good nickname, right? She goes out there and she could, rip your limbs apart. Then you look at the Polyana Botello fight. She goes out there and Darce chokes her in the first round of a somewhat competitive fight. And the one that stands out to me is the Kiwi Yan fight. And I don't mean any disrespect if I mispronounce that name. I just haven't heard it pronounced in a long time. But when I'm looking at that fight, I did think there were some signs that maybe Karine was slowing down just a touch and she was able to get the finish. She was able to get the choke she was looking for. But you just saw that she does take on a lot of risks, and she's a very active jiu-jitsu player. And sometimes when you're very active with your jiu-jitsu in mixed martial arts, if you don't get the submission, it can leave you very tired and compromised and vulnerable later on in a fight. So for Karine Silva, I think she's a front-loaded finisher. I think that if you look at the story of her career, let's go ahead and pull up Sherdog for Karine Silva. And the reason I say Sherdog is because it's very easy to read off the results there. So her wins, I'm just going to read her wins. We'll ignore her losses for the time being, okay? But Karine Silva's wins as a professional are sub-1 guillotine choke, sub-1 knee bar, sub-1 Bravo choke, sub-2 guillotine choke, TKO1 arm injury, sub-1 heel hook, sub-1 rear naked choke, TKO1 punches, loss via decision, sub-1 loss via knee bar, then the wins again, sub-2 triangle choke, TKO2 elbows, sub-1 armbar, TKO1 punches. Then she lost to Marina Moroz, sub-1 armbar, TKO1 punches, TKO1 punches, KO head kick round 1, KO elbows round 1. Are you guys sensing a pattern here? Because I am. This girl just goes out there and fights very, very hard for 2 rounds, it seems like. And it's kill or be killed. She's going out there to take people out. And if it doesn't work out, she might end up, leaving that tank on E. She might end up gassing herself out a little bit. She fights wild. She fights aggressive. She fights with, reckless abandon. And I think that makes for awesome fights. But I also think that means, she's going to leave the door open for Ariane Lipski unless she finishes her right away. And the gap on the ground could be there. You look at a girl like Lipski and she's getting beat on the ground by girls that have no business beating her on the ground. Or she's getting dominated on the ground by girls that, Karine Silva, I think, would be favored to beat in a grappling match, let's say. So the question then becomes, is Karine Silva going to fight to type? Is she going to be able to get takedowns? Is she going to be able to fight to the game plan here? And if so, then what is Ariane Lipski going to do? What is her answer going to be? Because I do think that Karine Silva is the more dangerous grappler, pure and simple. And I think she's a little bit more lethal with the strikes in the early going. I think that for Lipski, she's got some power in her hands. She's got an ability to throw, but she's right there to be hit. Let's pull up the UFC stats for just 1 second because we haven't introduced that to the conversation yet. But if we pull up the stats here for Ariane Lipski and Karine Silva, we're obviously dealing with a very short sample size, but Karine Silva does not have a positive strike differential, and neither does Ariane Lipski, right? They both have about an even strike differential. But the difference is Ariane Lipski is just throwing out more volume, 4.3 significant strikes landed per minute compared to just 3.4. I am rounding up slightly for Karine Silva. So she's throwing out a little bit more volume. And Karine Silva is averaging 2.5 takedowns per 15 minutes, but she's doing it against Moroz, Souza, Botello, and Kiwi. So let's see what happens when she fights somebody who's got 11 fights in the UFC, who's quite serious, and who seems like they're ready to go, ready to compete. I think it should be a good fight. But, it's a fight I keep going back and forth on in my head. I think people are maybe getting a little bit ahead of themselves with the Karine Silva's instantly get a submitter. I do think to myself, man, Ariane Lipski never been submitted, and she's had how many professional MMA fights? 25. So maybe she's not going to get submitted here, but maybe she's just going to get stuck on bottom, get put in some bad positions, and eventually get put away because that's how she's lost historically. She's getting ground and pounded a lot of the time. And I do think that that's a path for Karine Silva. It's not something I'm hearing a lot of people talk about, but Karine Silva is a dangerous girl. And if you have the position to submit somebody, then you have the position to positionally TKO them and dominate them on the mat. So for me, it just feels like Ariane Lipski, maybe it's lipstick on a pig. Maybe it's like, hey, I've really gotten some refinement to my skills, but overall the foundation's not solid. Maybe that's what it is. Or maybe, she's a diamond in the rough and people are counting her out a little bit too early. So I don't know how to approach this fight. This is one I'm going to have to tape and really find the tendencies of these fighters in specific in the grappling exchanges, because I think that's where this fight's going to be won or lost. I think it's going to be make or break in the grappling. And I think that Ariane Lipski, her grappling has not proven to be up to snuff at this point in her career. So while she's beating a bunch of girls that I think are impressive and she's going out there and doing everything asked of her, I just don't know that I'm sold yet. I'm going to go back and watch the tape, see if my mind changes. I'm going to see what her, fight week is like in terms of her preparation, any interviews, anything I could glean from that. But right now, it's looking like a potential pass fight for me. But I do think that it's probably a dog or pass situation. I think if you got the dog money on Karine Silva, hats off to you. It's a great pick and a great bet. But I think that now, there will be a tipping point where the value is on Ariane Lipski, because I think that this is a tale of two fights, right? I think the fight's somewhat binary. If I told you that this fight ended in the first 7.5 minutes, I think you'd be pretty confident that Karine Silva wins the fight. I think that if I told you that this fight went the full 15 minutes and you laid the chalk with Karine Silva, you'd be pretty disappointed in yourself. So those are the ways that I feel. But I think it's a great fight, like I mentioned, and I'm curious to see how this one shakes out. I think it's one of the higher quality fights on the card, regardless of weight class or gender. Next up, guys, we've got Jhonata Diniz taking on Austen Lane, and this is a weird fight. You've got the Glory kickboxer, I believe it is, in Jhonata Diaz. Let me just make sure I'm not talking puckus here. Yeah, he fought a little bit in Glory. He did some ACB, but essentially what you need to know is that this guy is a heavyweight kickboxer. He's 32 years of age, and he's got real knockout power. Against Eduardo Neves, I told people I liked the under there. I thought Neves could submit him, but I thought that when we, looked at that fight a little bit, Neves is a guy that doesn't always push his advantages. Sometimes engages a little bit recklessly in the pocket. And Diniz is a big fellow. You don't want to mess around with this guy. He can take you out with one big shot. Let's refer over to our friends at Fight Numbers and see what the best available odds are for this fight, and we'll frame up the conversation from there. So right now, guys, the best available price on Austen Lane, you're looking at Pinnacle Sportsbook plus 199, and we're looking at Jhonata Diniz minus 225 on the money line here. So about a 70% indication for Diniz. And listen, Diniz is a guy that he's going to have the speed advantage, in my opinion, on the feet. He's going to be the bigger knockout threat. I think he's going to be more technical. I think he's going to be more defensively responsible. I think he's going to be more sound. I think he's going to be more experienced. And I think that he's probably a little bit more savvy inside the octagon. When you look at a guy like Austen Lane, I just don't like how this guy fights. Last time out against Tafa, he looked terrible. In my opinion, I thought he was reckless. I thought he was wild. I thought he's constantly putting his chin on the line. And Tafa's basically a very limited fighter. He's got good power, but he's not very good. Richard Jacoby, I picked Austen Lane to beat that guy. I thought that was the setup of all setups. I thought it was a free win. But Richard Jacoby, I did not think was any good. He's 7-2-1 as a professional. He lost in the LFA recently via unanimous decision. So he's not a very high-level fighter in my view. He's all right. He beat Juan Adams, overrated fighter in my view, with no disrespect. Again, respect him for competing, but just don't really rate his game. Lost via KO1 against Vernon Lewis, lost via KO1 against Frank Tate, and you'll remember he was put away via KO1 against Greg Hardy back in the day on the Contender Series. So Austen Lane's just not had a great run of it, right? And he had the accidental eye poke with the Justin Tafa fight before he got knocked out by Justin Tafa. So Austen Lane, he's got some mobility, I guess. He is an athletic guy. He's got a former football player's background. He can throw some decent strikes. I just don't like the way he gets hit. I do not like the way he reacts to strikes. I don't think that he's very comfortable under fire. I don't think he's very comfortable in a fight. I think that he could beat guys that are really unathletic heavyweights, but I think a guy like Diniz is probably going to dominate him. Honestly, I just think that Diniz is probably going to knock him out brutally in the first round. I think the speed, the skill, the technique, the confidence, it's just going to be different levels here. I feel. Am I saying go lay the minus 250? You guys know my style. That's not me. Not on a kickboxer, not on a guy who doesn't have multiple paths to victory. I do think Diniz, KO or decision probably is most likely pass here. Got to keep it upright. But frankly, would you be surprised if Diniz had like as good or a better ground game than a guy like Austen Lane, who's like a former football player and seems like a kind of hanger-on in the MMA industry who doesn't really have a bright future? I don't know. I wouldn't be stunned by any outcome here. But yeah, I think Kadeem makes a good point. Being athletic doesn't win you fights at heavyweight. I think that's wrong. I think that being athletic doesn't win you every fight at heavyweight. But I also would say, like, there's so many heavyweights that aren't athletic that athleticism is like a great tool. You could leverage it. You could use it as a tool. But I think Diniz is a pretty good athlete, right? He was a solid kickboxer, and now he's 32-0, undefeated professional MMA fighter. And you got a guy in Austen Lane, on the other hand. If we just pull up their measurables, Lane is going to, not have a reach advantage, which he's used to having. He's only going to be 2 inches taller. He's normally towering over his opponents, and he's going to be 4 years older in this spot. So he's got more professional experience in MMA, but I think that in real high-level fighting, Diniz has more, high-level professional experience. He fought against the likes of freaking Rico Verhoeven in 2013. I mean, that's just a different level than fucking Greg Hardy on the Contender Series. I'm sorry, guys. So I think that Diniz, in all realistic worlds, should win the fight, but it's MMA. It's light heavyweight type scenarios where crazy shit happens. If Austen Lane gets a takedown, maybe everything just goes out the window. But I have a feeling Diniz either, picks him apart to a decision or knocks him out pretty brutally. Shout out to my guy, Johnny Cole Media says, let's go, Liam. Let's go, Johnny. Appreciate you being here. Hunter, fair play that he is super athletic. He's not that bad. I agree. He's not that bad, but he's not that good either. Austen doesn't go for takedowns. He can't strike for shit. My guy's got no fight IQ. Yeah, I tend to agree with Daz there. Shout out to Daz as well, who says Lipski can freeze up against a fighter who pours on the pressure. Karine will probably take her down and choke her out. I think that's very possible. Shout out to Real Fight Pick says, I will take the prettier one. Give me Silva. Hey, that's one way to cap. The Chinese Andrade. I think that Andrade is way better than Kiwi, but I feel you for sure. So there you go. Bunch of great comments from you guys. Shout out to the sharpest chat in the game. What do we need? A swig of coffee. We all deserve one. Take one if you would like one, because I'm taking one right now. And it's right on to the next one each and every time. Appreciate you guys for rocking with us. It is 2:18 local time here, and I have all the energy in the world. I could do this shit all night. I'm having a blast talking fights with you guys. I'm glad that the UFC is back in our lives this week. So without further ado, let's spin it on forward to another fight on this main card where we've got Jonathan Pearce back in action, taking on David Onama. And David Onama, guys, been the source of much controversy. The silent assassin, no Vicente Luque. He went out there last fight and absolutely starched Gabriel Santos with a beautiful knockout, uppercut, unbelievable shot. And that is kind of serving to, distance him from the James Krause situation. My man went out there and lost to Nate Landwehr via close majority decision. He lost to Mason Jones in his UFC debut via decision as well. Mason Jones no longer with the promotion. He knocked out Gabriel Benitez, who we will see featured on this card. He submitted Garrett Armfield, who we will, see featured again in the UFC. He's a UFC quality fighter, but a weight class down at his best. And the Gabriel Santos win is a fine win. Gabriel Santos, 10-1 as a professional, now 10-2 after suffering that loss. He's 0-2 in the UFC. But, guys, he lost a close split decision to Lerone Murphy, and it was David Onama who was able to put him away. And I thought that was really impressive because, we saw Lerone Murphy. He's a tough guy, man. Lerone Murphy's a tough customer. And, he's not the most finishing guy, but he does have 2 knockout wins in the UFC. Knocked out Makwan Amirkhani in brutal fashion. Knocked out Ricardo Ramos in brutal fashion. And, to go out there and force that guy to fight you hard for 15 minutes to a very close split decision, guy who's had a great run in the UFC, I think that speaks well of Santos. So Onama, he can crack, man. He's got that power. And the Nate the Train fight, I mean, we've seen Nate the Train, you can hit that guy with a brick, an anvil. Sometimes he dies. Sometimes he doesn't die. Fighting's a little bit unpredictable in that way. When will his chin hold up? When will it give out? It's really hard to say. But what we do know is some guys will go out there and fight like a dog for your money. Nate Landwehr was one of those guys that he went out there and fought like a dog for your money the whole time. But then you look at David Onama, and he's done his job against Gabriel Benitez. A lot of people expected him to go out there and deliver, and he did. Knocked him out, put him in the box, brutal knockout. Great job. Then you look at the Garrett Armfield fight. I had the submission prop on David Onama that night. Thought he was going to be too big, too strong, too physical, and that's exactly what took place. But now he's got Jonathan Pearce, and Jonathan Pearce is a solid grappler, right? Last time out, he was taking down Joanderson Brito, dominating him physically in the wrestling and the grappling at times, such that he started talking shit. He started saying, do something. You don't like it, do something about it, boy. And then, of course, because MMA is the greatest sport ever, Brito proceeds to stand up and instantly choke him out because he told him to do something, boy. And so he did it. But when you look, Joanderson Brito is a freak. He's very strong, very good submission grappler. Went, position for position with the talk of the town, Diego Lopes, and beat him, right? Outrode him to a decision, did not get submitted. Movsar Evloev gets all the credit in the world for eking one out over Diego Lopez the same way. But our guy Joanderson Brito was able to do just that. Now you look at Jonathan Pearce, and I do think that, he's got real skills, right? He went out there and beat Darren Elkins. Nicely done. Beat Makwan Amirkhani, got the finish in that one. Beat Christian Rodriguez, a win that aged well, but certainly he took that fight on short notice, took it up a weight class, still almost guillotine choked Jonathan Pearce, came very close to doing so. I would argue he burnt the shit out of his arms going for that choke as well, so something to take note of there. Then he beats Omar Morales, a guy who never really panned out in the UFC. If we look at Omar Morales, he's 11-4 in the promotion, lost to Chris Duncan, Uros Medic, Jonathan Pearce, and Giga Chikadze. Only win in the bunch was Shane Young. Neither guy, I believe, is still with the promotion as a result. Then you look at Kai Kamaka III, another guy who struggled in the UFC immensely. He was able to beat Kai Kamaka III, but his UFC debut was marred with controversy. He goes out there and gets brutalized, beat up, absolutely obliterated by Joe Lozar, guys. That was a historic beatdown of epic proportions. I mean, Joe just battered his face. Excuse me. Beat the absolute tar out of him. And then partied on his dead body. So it was a shocking performance from Joe Lozon in that one. He turned back the clock and put this kid through the absolute wood chipper. Then 5 straight wins rattled off for Jonathan Pearce, but none of them particularly jumping off the page at you. Probably the best win in the bunch is Christian Rodriguez, guy who's done his best work down at 135 pounds. But now, after he suffered a defeat, we saw what he did last time, right? He bounced back. He rattled off a bunch of wins. But I will say on the regional scene, he did have multiple submission losses in a row. He did have 3 straight losses on the regional scene. He has lost fights before as an amateur, as a pro. So maybe he's able to rattle some wins off, get that momentum back under his belt. But right now he's 5-2 in the promotion, and they've done him no favors. In my view, they're giving him a tough matchup here in Onama. And yes, I think that he should be the better on paper grappler. But can he grapple this guy, who's very muscular, who's very strong, who's very committed to standing back up and using his offense? Can he out-grapple this guy for a hard 15 minutes? Because, last time out, I did think he was showing some signs of fatigue before he, eventually let Brito up and submit him there. So he can go out there and push a decent pace. He can go out there and work hard for 15 minutes. But I think it's more so when his opponent starts to fatigue, he can keep pushing that same pace. Whereas, if Onama can keep pushing that same pace with him, I think Onama is going to do way more damage throughout this fight. I think he hits harder. I think he's more intentional with his shots. I think he's more willing to be aggressive as well. So Yeah, it just seems to me like David Onama is probably the money line side here. I'm liking the dogs, especially early on this card. But I always got to level with you guys. I got to call it the way I see it. I got to tell you how I feel. And I think there's a real path for JSP to going out there and dominating in the wrestling and the grappling. But I don't know, man. Like, I feel like Onama is a guy that I like his physical attributes. I like his intangibles. I think he's going to go out there and fight hard for your money. And when you put a plus money tag by a guy like that, it's probably going to be dog or pass for me more often than not. Again, 3-2 in the promotion, but losses to Mason Jones on short notice. I believe up at 155. That's correct. And then, lost to Nate Landwehr via close majority decision. I don't know. It just seems to me like David Onama probably has a little bit more long-term upside, but both these guys are solid. So excited to see how that featherweight clash shakes out. Now, let's finish up our main card discussion with Tim Means taking on Uros Medic, and this might be the best nickname battle on the card. We got the Dirty Bird, Tim Means, taking on the Doctor, Uros Medic, and I have had an absolute ball betting on Uros Medic fights, guys. Let's go to the betmma.tips machine and see exactly how well we've done betting Uros Medic. But I can just tell you from memory, it's been one of my more profitable guys to bet on. So I have bet 6.82 units to win 7.39 units on this guy. On and against, I should say, right? Because not all my bets were on him. I had Jalen Turner plus 108 against Uros Medic. I had Uros Medic plus 120 against Omar Morales. And I had Mirtabek Orobai minus 140 against Uros Medic. So I was very happy with my handicapping of Uros Medic so far in the UFC. When he was plus 120, I unloaded a huge clip on him against an opponent in Omar Morales that I thought was way overmatched, way undersized, and I was glad that that paid off. But I've really been proud of the ability to analyze his fights as well, because I had Jalen Turner by submission, quarter unit at plus 700, and I added Jalen Turner by submission, a quarter unit at plus 900. The market was moving against me, and I said, give me it again, because I believed in it. And I look at this guy, Uros Medic, and there's no real footage of him grappling regionally except where he looks like shit, right? So he looked terrible in the grappling footage in Alaska, and it was limited. It was few and far between. And there's one thing I can tell you. When we see these guys come from Alaska, typically speaking, the thing that suffers the most isn't the striking. Everybody can strike a little bit. It's the grappling, man. The grappling is just so piss poor oftentimes. And, we've seen guys like Jared Cannonier. We've seen exceptions to the rule. But I think that this guy, Uros Medic, he made a baffling career decision, I feel, where he goes from and keep in mind, I've never trained at this gym. So this is all from an outsider's perspective, and I could be a total jackass. But Uros Medic picks up, goes from Alaska to training at King's MMA under Rafael Cordero, Master Rafael Cordero. So it's all respect to the master. It's all respect to King's MMA, but it just seems like there's a better fit out there. When you've got a guy like this in Uros Medic who's long, who's awkward, who can strike a little bit, who's got some power, who's got some pop, somebody can make something out of a guy like that. They can use his skills. They can leverage the assets and the tools that he has to make him an effective fighter. But when you're looking at this guy, Uros Medic, I think his grappling is piss poor, honestly. I think it's underdeveloped critically for the UFC level. I think we've seen several examples of that now regionally in the UFC. Mirtabek Orobai is a guy who's at 155 pounds, for his sophomore outing in the UFC. Dominated this man at 170 pounds, did it on short notice, made it look easy, I thought, as well. Shout out to Mirtabek Orobai. But then Jalen Turner, what did he do? I mean, easily out-wrestled, easily out-grappled a guy like Uros Medic. And Jalen Turner's been out-wrestled. He's been out-grappled a number of times now at the UFC level, but he was able to turn the script on Uros Medic in an instant, right? As soon as I say I'm going to put him down, puts him down, puts him in the choke. Thanks for playing, buddy. It's all over. So I think of an interesting matchup with the Doctor Uros Medic, right? He's a guy that should have some potential. He's got a great knockout on his record against Matthew Semmelsberger, one of the more underrated knockouts of the recent years. Just went out there, landed some good shots, backed him up in combination, and then boom, spinning back fist drops him all the way to the ground. sensational knockout. I've really been impressed by Uros Medic on the feet at times. But like I said, it's the ground game, it's the wrestling, it's the in between, it's the phase shifting that I don't like from Uros. And here's the other thing. I think that he's a panicky guy in the grappling, and I think that makes him way worse. So what does panic induce when you're grappling? Two things: exhaustion and bad decision making. So I think that the problem for Uros and the reason he's been so easy to submit for a couple guys in the UFC is that when he starts getting into grappling situations, he gets fatigued more quickly and he's much more likely to make mistakes than his opponents, typically speaking. Now, on the other side of things, guys, we got Tim Means, and Tim Means is an old fighter, right? Tim Means is 40 years of age, and the truth is, Tim Means is not a prolific grappler, right? You look at his record; he's actually 5-7 to the submission prop in his career. He loves getting submitted. You know, the most often way that Tim Means gets caught, I would say, is him getting submitted. So if we go over and refer to Tim Means, he's another guy that I've had great success betting on and against. I had Tim Means plus 115 against Platinum Mike Perry. He was able to go out there and get the win. Mike Perry was giving him a shout out in all his interviews that he did this week. And then on the other side, I had Max Griffin big against Tim Means as well. I had Kevin Holland by submission and inside the distance against Tim Means, both at plus money. I had Fialho and Tim Means fight does not go the distance. So I've been all over the Tim Means money train. I've made well over 10 units profit betting on Tim Means fights for and against. So he's a guy that I really like and respect. 40 years of age is getting right up there with an age where I can no longer bet on you in UFC fights. You know, it's going to make it really tough. But let's just talk about some of the facts of this matchup, the underlying realities. You've got Tim Means here listed 6'2". He's going to be the taller athlete. You got Tim Means listed 75-inch reach. He's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage over Medic. Now, he is 9 years older, so the rate by which he gets knocked out should fly through the roof. But then you go look at the record of Tim Means, and he has 2 losses via knockout in a 27-fight professional career. So he's not an easy guy to knock out. Only one of those knockouts was in the UFC, and it was against Nico Price. He was knocked out in that fight. But Nico Price, weirdly heavy-handed guy, and prior to that, we had not seen a KO stoppage loss since 2004, I believe, for Tim Means. Let me just confirm that via ShareDog because I just want to make sure I'm not talking out of my tuchus here. But I believe that Tim Means has not been knocked out aside from that one fight that we mentioned. Yeah, he had an injury TKO back in 2004. And otherwise, the only time he's ever been stopped by strikes in his whole career was against Nico Price back in 2019. Tough as shit. Actually, a guy that could go out there and pursue some takedowns. You know, shout out to Daz in the chat. Says, Tim's a wrestling coach. Let's see if he actually wrestles. I think that's interesting. Medic does gas past the 7.5-minute mark. That is absolutely true, Kadeem. Said, Real Fight Pick says, whatever he decides, give me the non-senior citizen. So, hey, I mean, that's always a plausible scenario, right? The younger guy, you know, the guy in Medic who does seem like he could potentially take a big step up at any point and get better. But I don't know. You know, I feel like the Dirty Bird Tim Means, you know, he hasn't looked great in his recent run, but he did just knock out Andre Fialho 6 months ago. And that was a fight that showed you he's still willing to go out there and trade blows with these younger guys, and he could go out there and still get the win. You look at the fights that he's won and lost in the UFC. He's got 2 wins via submission in the UFC, and he guillotine choked Thiago Alves in the very first round from standing, I believe. And he also was able to go out there and submit George Sullivan via arm triangle choke way back in the day. So he's got a round 1 submission. He's got a round 3 submission in the UFC. He's got a couple knockouts along the way. He's won by decision. He's a versatile guy with a bunch of different tools for winning fights. And the Fialho win was perhaps more impressive because Tim Means, an older guy, was able to go out there and do it in round 3, track him down, find the way to get the job done, close the show on a guy who was gassing, on a guy who tried to spend his energy killing Tim. Tim was able to survive everything, chase him down, come back, and get the finish. So all hats off to him, all credit and respect to him. He's 6-1 to the knockout in the UFC, 2-5 to the submission in the UFC, 7-6 to the decision in the UFC. My man is above water in everything but submissions in the UFC for a damn long time. Really just got to give nothing but credit and respect. 15-12 and 1 no contest after 27 fights in the promotion. Hats off to the guy. What a damn soldier. And over 50 professional fights for Tim Means as of Saturday night. What a absolute savage. Nobody couldn't happen to a nicer guy. So win, lose, or draw here. We're rooting for Tim. But I think this fight's going to end violently. I don't think Tim has 15 minutes worth of fighting really in him very frequently anymore. I think he's more so opt to pour out the jug in this one. And I think that Uros Medic is the same way. I think he's a known gasser. I don't think that he's got great tools to fight over 15 minutes, but he does have finishing power. He does have some real ruthless aggression. So let's see how that one shakes out. But now it's on to the prelims, guys. In the prelim preview, we might go just a touch faster on some of these fights, but I appreciate all your feedback. And again, if you guys have questions, comments, concerns, you want a little bit more depth than what you got in the breakdown, no problem. Just hit me up in the comment section down below. Happy to share more information with you guys. Now we've got Lord Kong, I missed a couple fights. Wow. Let's go back. We've got Yahya taking on Victor La Mangosta Henry. And this is a fun one. Yahya, a legendary figure in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, just sensational grappling. You look at the guy, he's been competing for a million years. He's 21-1 as a professional to the submission. He had not been finished due to strikes in quite some time, right? You look at his career record. It had been since the Joseph Benavidez fight in the WEC. So the first UFC loss for Yahya inside the distance was unfortunately a result of that last fight with Montel Jackson. He got folded up and knocked out, big shots, raining down on him, and the fight was stopped in the first round. But that was, a full year ago, right? That was in March 22nd of 2020, April 22nd, 2023. And now he's back to do battle with Victor Henry. And Victor Henry is coming off his own hard times. If you guys remember, he got blasted in the nuts against Javid Basharat last time out. I had a bet on Victor Henry, kind of got bailed out there by that low blow, but also it just went to show, Basharat kind of skirts a little bit around the rules, and so we were able to catch him with our guy, Ayman Zahabi. I was very proud of that bet, to follow through on that fade train, and we were able to get our coins. But in any case, he beat Tony Gravely via split decision. Tony Gravely is a fine fighter. He's not setting the world on fire, but he's 4-4 in the UFC. He's got a pretty solid record, can go out there and wrestle a little bit, take people down. And I thought that we saw a great job from Victor Henry neutralizing the threat of Tony Gravely in that fight. Still a close split decision, could have went either way. Lost a unanimous decision to Rafael Sunsao. Not a competitive fight. Was made to look pretty bad in that matchup. Then you look, he was able to, beat Houndy Barcelos. Again, I bet him there. He's a plus 425 underdog. Love Victor Henry when he's a big dog. But now we're not talking about that. Right? We're talking about Victor as a huge favorite. And the one thing I don't love for Victor in this fight is he's very sound and credentialed with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but Yahya is world-class with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He is a world-class black belt. He's very, very high level. He has been for a very long time. And Victor Henry is a guy that normally is willing to invite a little risk. He's not afraid to engage. He's not afraid to mix it up a little bit in the positions. And I just think you don't want to give Yahya a chance. You want to do what Montel Jackson did. You want to keep him away. You want to land big shots. You want to punish him. And you want to end the fight as quickly as possible. I think that's what we're going to see in terms of the game plan, in terms of the attempt. But I think it's, again, easier said than done. So we'll have to see how that one shakes out. But for me, I like Victor Henry. I think he's a fun fighter. I think he's a great guy. I like the Josh Barnett War Master gimmick. I like that camp. I like the catch wrestling style. I like the fact that this guy went over to Japan and fought everybody and did the damn thing the hard way. But I also think that, Victor Henry's style is just not really built for covering these minus 500 prices. He's in there standing, throwing, trading, going crazy in the pocket with these guys a little bit. Obviously picking his shots, but he's willing to go out there and fight, put it on the line. And then in the grappling exchanges, again, Victor Henry should be able to go out there and beat a lot of these guys. He does have real skills, but it is a question like, hey, is this guy too easygoing? Is this guy too badass? Does he have too much confidence where he just wants to get in there and engage in the guard, engage in the grappling against a guy like Yahya who could just change the complexion of a fight so fast? I was really impressed with the things I've seen from Yahya on the tape. The leg lock he gave, the ability to take the back, the positional control, the ability to mix in the wrestling. The guy is just really sensational at his game, at knowing how to make his physical attributes work for him. So I think Yahya is probably in for it here. I think the pace will be too much. I do think Victor Henry picks up in rounds 2 and 3 when Yahya is tending to slow down. But I think that you've got to fight really smart here if you're Victor Henry and just survive round 1, make this guy tired, be in a positive energy transfer. And if you do that, I think you should win the fight. But Yahya is no easy guy to get one over on. That's for sure. He's a tough customer. All right. Also, I should just mention, for posterity's sake, we did see Victor Henry drop the ball as a massive favorite against Rafael Assunção. So he's back in that big favorite role against an aged Brazilian legend. Do you want to find out again at minus, 3XX, 4XX, whatever it is? Let's pull up our friends at Fight Numbers and see exactly what the best numbers are on the board. Yahya is plus 430 right now on FanDuel Sportsbook. That looks like the best available. You got minus 500 on Borgata for our friend Victor Henry. So not minus 300, not minus 400, minus 500 Victor Henry. Holy smokes, what could go wrong? Another guy who's a little bit older, obviously younger than Yahya, but Victor Henry is 36, going on 37. Yahya is 39. So not a huge age gap, not a huge size gap or anything between these two. I think the big gap here, the only real gap here is the pace gap. I think there's a massive pace gap favoring Victor Henry, if that wasn't clear. Next up, guys, we got Austen Thud Hubbard taking on Michael Figlak. And I got to just level with you guys. I don't remember Michael Figlak fighting. He fought for SCM. He lost that fight. That was all the way back in 2022. That's perhaps why I don't remember it. We are all the way to 2024. My man had a canceled bout with Chris Duncan around this time last year. It says Figlak withdrew from the bout. So here's what I need to do. I need to learn more about Figlak. I need to go back and rewatch his game. I don't really remember shit about Figlak. So for me, Figlak is like a enigma. He's a figment of my imagination. But as for Austen Hubbard, he's got a way saltier record on paper. He's 3-5 with the promotion in the UFC, but he also has never been stopped with strikes. So he's 4-0 career to the KO or TKO prop. And he has been submitted 3 times, but he's also secured 3 wins via submission. So again, he's shown some promise in that regard. And then 8-4 career to the decision. So more often than not, the judges are favoring his style. They're liking what he's doing, but he has dropped a bunch of fights that way as well. So got to figure out what you're doing to appeal more to the judges. Now, he's been submitted twice at the UFC level. Joe Selecki submitted him with a rear naked choke in the very first round, was able to climb all over him and get that done. And then Kurt Hollaba, back in UFC 292, that was in August of last year. He was able to triangle choke me in the first round, or we're talking about Thud Hubbard, got submitted by Hollaba, man. And Hollaba just looked absolutely lost against, what's his name? Goodness gracious. He just had a fight announced today as well. Trey Ogden, right? He looked completely lost in the grappling with Trey Ogden. Looked like he had no business being in there. So, again, Figlak has way less professional experience. He's been out of the octagon for a while. And Austen Hubbard, he's re-debuting in the UFC, but he just beat Aaron McKenzie, Roosevelt Roberts, technically UFC type level fighters. And then he lost to Vince Pichel. That's a fair loss. He beat Dakota Bush. That doesn't tell you much. He lost to Joe Selecki. That's a fair loss. He beat Max Roskopf, kind of ended a hype train there. That was an impressive win. Lost to Marco Madsen, a guy who's an Olympic wrestling style. Really bad for Thud Hubbard. Beat Caio Propolek, lost to Davi Ramos, another grappling-based fighter. So basically, high-level grappling-based fighters have been able to get one over on this guy historically throughout his career. 0 submission wins for Figlak. So unless I, go discover that Figlak is like the world's greatest wrestler and grappler and all these things, I'm going to have to think that Thud Hubbard is probably the side here as the guy who's been a little more active, who's fought the better quality of competition, who's accrued a little bit more experience. But I don't really love his game either. The Oben Elliott win for Figlak is certainly a quality win. He did stop him in that fight as well. But I don't know that he's proven very much at the UFC level yet. And at 27 years of age, he could lose another fight here, get some more experience under his belt, and then go on a run in the UFC. But he's kind of got to prove something to me before I'd feel comfortable betting him at chalk in this spot. So this is one that I'm going to have to go deeper on the research. But for me, early lean is towards Austen Thud Hubbard getting the job done there. So let's go through and recap really briefly just to make sure that we're all on the same page. I think it's Alex Perez or pass in the main event, though I think Matheus Nicolau by sub and the fight to end by sub are a couple of potential interesting looks. I think that it's Bogdan Guskov or pass from a money line standpoint. I think that the fight is very likely to end inside the distance. And I favor the ends by submission there as well from a value standpoint. I'm looking at Silva and Lipski. I think that Silva by TKO is potentially sneaky. I think that Lipski late round TKO is potentially live as well. Both these women, it's about getting to dominant positions. I think that for Karine Silva, if she's fresh in a dominant position, she can finish this fight. I think that for Ariane Lipski, if she can get her opponent tired, drag her into deep waters, and get to the top position, she could finish this fight with ground and pound. So fun fight, great matchmaking. One Brazilian can survive in advance. Let's find out who it's going to be. I am leaning towards Diniz via KO or decision. I think he's going to, dominate Austen Lane personally, but I will do more tape and due diligence. I think that the Onama and Pearce fight could go either way, but I'm leaning towards Onama. I think that the Medic and Means fight could go either way. I'm leaning towards violence and also thinking about the end sub being potential value there. Yahya and Victor Henry. I'm thinking I'm probably going to avoid this fight like the plague, but Victor Henry is probably overpriced in this spot. And then I think that Austen Hubbard is probably the side, but not compelled to play him at such a small plus money number because Austen has some foundational flaws to his game. He can be hurt. He can be cracked. He can be out wrestled. He can be out grappled. He can be submitted. So he's got some real flaws to his game. But now that we've gotten on the same page, let's go ahead and circle forward to Dante Mays and Caio Machado. This is a heavyweight matchup. Now this is when people are talking about the bottom of the barrel. This card sucks. We're back in the Apex. This is what they're talking about. Dante Mays, Lord Kong, 10-6 as a professional fighter. He's taking on Caio Machado, 8-2 as a professional fighter. Caio Machado is going to be the younger athlete in this spot. He's going to be the smaller athlete. Dante Mays going to have 2 inches of height in this spot. He's also going to have a 3-inch reach advantage according to Tapology. He's also the heavier athlete, right? You look, the most recent weigh-in, 250 pounds for Caio Machado. It was 264 pounds in a loss for Lord Mays, or for Lord Kong, Dante Mays in his most recent appearance. So you look at Dante Mays, he's a training partner of John Jones. That's his claim to fame. But truthfully, he's not a very good fighter, in my view. Been finished many times. He's 3-2 career to the submission. He's 4-1 career to the knockout, 3-2 career to the decision. And it looks like he was disqualified one time as well. Trying to look back and see that. Yeah, he was disqualified against Kenny Fredenberg in 2016 back at the RFA. He was TKO'd via ground and pound by Alan Crowder on the Contender Series, a name that will live in infamy. He beat Mo Usman on the regional scene, so shout out to him for that. And then he lost to Cyril Gane, got heel hooked in that spot. Lost to Rodrigo Nascimento twice. He got decision by him most recently. He got submitted by him back in 2020. He beat Roque Martinez, Josh Parisian, and Andre Arlovsky via knockout. So he really doesn't have an exceptional record. He lost to Augusto Sakai when Augusto Sakai was in the pits of his career. On the strength of a 4-fight losing skid, Augusto Sakai comes in and levels the playing field against Dante Mays. So I really just haven't been blown away by this guy. He's 3-4 in the UFC. So half decent, I guess, but just nothing that's blowing your hair back. As for Caio Machado, on the other hand, he was 1-0 on the Contender Series. He beat Kevin Soflarski, a highly touted IMAFF. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. he was basically supposed to fight Safarsky, and Safarsky, had all this reputation, and I just couldn't get a good feel for Machado, right? And when I say that, I just mean like he was fighting Lee Meehan, who's like 50. He's fighting all these old guys. He's fighting these guys who looked like they were all out of sorts. But it did look like he had some idea of how to grapple. It did look like he threw a decent amount of volume for a heavyweight. And I think that if those things remain true, this is a somewhat winnable fight for him. Now, let's pull up UFC stats and see if we can get some data to work with for this matchup. But I've got Dante Mays listed at a negative strike differential, 3.6 strikes landed per minute compared to 3.84 absorbed over a pretty lengthy sample size. And Caio Machado has almost no sample size, right? Just the Safarsky fight and the Parkin fight, neither one of whom are known for their, rock solid defense, so to speak. But when you look at those fights, he was landing over 6 strikes, significant strikes per minute, which is huge, and he was absorbing less than 2 significant strikes per minute. So way better stats on the Machado side. And again, has he fought the same level of competition? No, not even close. But he outlanded Mick Parkin by a pretty substantial number. The problem was just that he gave up 6 minutes of control time. He got taken down 3 times. His takedown defense was not on point at all. And Dante Mays is a guy that will go out there and attempt takedowns from time to time. But the problem is, if you're a Mays backer, he's averaging 0.8 takedowns per 15 minutes and a 43% accuracy. So he's not attempting them that often. He doesn't get them every time he attempts them. So the last time we saw Dante Mays secure a takedown was against Josh Parisian all the way back in 2021. He got 6 takedowns there and power humped his way to the victory. But we haven't seen him use that style since. And when he went against Roque Martinez, he landed one more significant strike. They both went even 1-for-1 on takedowns. Like, this is a guy who's dead even with Roque Martinez, by the numbers. That's not really a great sign. He's, getting out wrestled and then out grappled by Rodrigo Nascimento back in 2020. Not a great look either. There's just been some things that give you pause about Dante. And, he's been out wrestled more often than he's out wrestled anybody at this level. So, the only opponents you could argue that he out wrestled were Roque Martinez and Josh Parisian. And neither one of those guys are very sound. And more often than not, this guy's given up multiple takedowns. Like, he gave up multiple takedowns to Hamdi Abdelwahab, which you forgive because Hamdi's a former Olympic wrestler. Gave up multiple takedowns to Rodrigo Nascimento, though I will grant he closed the gap on that by the second time they fought. Didn't give up any takedowns in the rematch. 3 takedowns to Cyril Gane and 2 takedowns to Alan Crowder back in 2017. So really, Dante Mays, not a great wrestler or grappler either. It's just a question of, can he get on top and win this fight? Because I think that Caio Machado, he's going to be motivated coming off of a loss. He's going to want to get back in there and show a little bit of a better product of himself. He is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He does appear to have, been training pretty seriously for this fight. Posting up pictures, posting up a lot of work that he's been putting in. Looks like he's in the right shape. I think he's even been doing some training with Carl Williams. I think that we're seeing a lot of the right moves being made by Caio Machado, but I still feel like there's a lot he needs to prove. He's been training with some great fighters over at Extreme Couture, getting some work in with the big bodies over there. I think that's only wise and going to help him over time. But it just doesn't seem to me like an easy fight to read. A closely lined fight seems about right to me. So for me, give me Caio Machado, but ever so slightly. I did not feel great about that pick. I will do more research throughout the week and get back to you guys, but I just am not a Dante Mays believer. I think the guy's kind of a bonehead overall. Next up, we've got Ketlen Souza taking on Marnic Mann, and I'll just start by not burying the lead. We've got Ketlen Souza coming off a knee rearrangement here, guys. She got absolutely ripped apart by Karine Silva, the aforementioned. And now we're looking at a Ketlen Souza who is coming back, less than a full year later, right? And she's got to take on Marnic Mann, the sawed-off shotgun, who's a tough girl who wants to be out there and who really wants to win. And that's a tough opponent to take on. So I think that it's nothing but hats off to her, right? Marnic Mann has really struggled at the UFC level. She got brought in for the UFC Fight Night against Josephine Knudsen. I think that was on short notice. She lost a unanimous decision there. She beat Amber Brown, who is one fight above 500 in the LFA. And prior to that, she lost to Bruna Brazil, got head kicked viciously in the second round. Did not look like she had anything to offer in the wrestling, the grappling, or the striking for the most part in that contest. So we haven't really seen a defining career win, except for, potentially the contract that she received after getting her butt whooped by Josephine Knudsen. Because, hey, it brought her back for another opportunity here, another paycheck. We wish her the very best with that. But both these women are basically coming in not optimal circumstances, right? For Marnic Mann, they didn't really want to sign her to the UFC. They kind of were forced their hand, right? She was brought in as enhancement talent against Brazil. She loses the fight, gets finished. Okay, we'll give you another shot if you can get a win. So she goes out there, gets a win. Hey, all right, we'll give you a shot. Gives her a shot, I believe, on short notice against Knudsen, and then she falls short. Meanwhile, on the other side, there was a nice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fight win streak for Ketlen Souza coming in to her UFC debut. She had won a couple bouts in Invicta, trying to get some matches against quality opponents, but she also lost some, questionable fights on the come up. Got armbarred in the first round by Fabiolane Melo in 2018. She got body kicked in the third round by Ariane Carnelosi, who is also a UFC fighter. That was in 2019 in Future FC. And she lost to Diane Cardoso via leg kicks in the first round. So she's had a problem dealing with damage and staying healthy, I would argue, throughout her career. That knee bar, it was a weird, awkward, ugly sequence, but also it was real damage incurred. She incurred damage when she got leg kick TKO'd, I'm sure. She incurred damage when she got body kick TKO'd, I'm sure. And even when you win fights, you're taking some subconcussive damage throughout. So it can be very, very serious. So I just encourage people, watch out for your mental and physical health. And you've got in Karine Silva, this girl that came out there to take the mental and physical health of Ketlen Souza. And I don't know what version we're going to get back. I just wonder to myself, is she going to look comfortable moving on the feet? Is she going to look comfortable throwing kicks? Is she going to look comfortable moving and bouncing in and out of range? Is she going to look comfortable trying to initiate the grappling? Is she going to look comfortable in the wrestling? I think for a lot of reasons, Ketlen Souza does check some boxes here for me. She's the younger fighter. She's the bigger fighter here in terms of the height. She's also going to have, a very comparable reach. So she's got more professional experience in a younger fighter. She's Brazilian. I think that she's a little bit more well-varied in her game. You look at Ketlen Souza, she is 8-2 career to the knockout, just 1-2 career to the submission. So could be a potential vulnerability for her. 4-0 career to the decision, though. So she can go out there, fight you for 15 minutes, get the win. But we've also seen she can go out there and stop the fight. Now on the other side, Marnic Mann got TKO'd via head kick against Bruna Brazil. But other than that, she's never been finished. Had the one decision loss against Josephine Knudsen. And then on the regional scene, she was undefeated 4-0 as a amateur regional fighter. So when you're looking at her professional career, she was able to come in, beat mostly overmatched opposition on the way to that Contender Series fight. So Marnic Mann is now, let's just pull this up for accuracy, 31 years of age. She was born in March of 1993, and she's training out of Montana MMA. And I believe her husband or boyfriend just got promoted to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. So he's out there training, working, fighting as well. It looks like Marnic Mann and her husband are on the same journey. They're both trying to prepare for these fights, get ready. And, it just seems to me like there's a lot of faith being put in Ketlen Souza coming off an injury, a lot of faith being put in her coming off of, a pretty mediocre rise, I would say. I think that Ketlen Souza had real skills on paper. I actually expected Ketlen Souza to win that fight with Karine Silva if it got really extended. But Karine Silva is so dangerous in the early going. She can put the fight away in an instant. And now I'm looking at a spot where, Marnic Mann is not the kind of girl that I want to bet on long-term. And I'll never lay chalk on a girl like Marnic Mann. But if she's ever going to win a UFC fight, this is probably her best opportunity, right? Because you're looking at her fighting somebody who's coming off an injury, who's coming off of almost a year outside of the octagon. And meanwhile, for Marnic Mann, she has almost nothing to lose. She comes in as a big underdog, right? She's already had 8 professional bouts. And two of them were essentially at the UFC level. She's back to the scene of the crime where she fought on Contender Series, and I'm sure where she fought in that fight. And let me just confirm that. Yep. So she's been at the T-Mobile Arena. She's been at the Apex Center. She's back in Las Vegas one more time. Can Marnic Mann finally break the Vegas seal and get a win in Las Vegas? We will have to find out, because Ketlen Souza, on the other hand, did lose as well in Vegas in her last opportunity. So now she's trying to right the wrong. Everybody's got some demons that are confronting them. But I think it's a fascinating fight. And I think that Ketlen Souza, could go out there and do a great job. But I feel like for me, it's just too wide of a price given the amount of unknowns. So you might throw out that ticket a lot, but long-term, I think it's probably better to take the plus money with Marnic Mann than it is to take the minus 3XX with Souza. But I will watch tape and make sure that my thoughts align with the tape study that I do for this fight. I am not going to comment, guys, on the James Llontop and Chris Padilla fight. Why am I not going to comment on it? I do not know the first thing about Chris Padilla, guys. Llontop, I know, was scheduled to have another fight, and I don't know where that was scheduled to be. What I could tell you is, doing a quick scan of Chris's record, he's fought pretty decent fighters. He fought Christian Aguilera. He fought Jason Gonzalez. He fought Gabe Green. But he lost to basically all these good guys. Let me see if there's any good wins he has. He beat Justin James, who is a former UFC fighter, not a very high level one, admittedly. Yeah, I'm not blown away by any of these wins. That's the long and short of it. So I think Padilla has fought a lot of tough guys. I think he says yes to every opportunity, but that has led to 3 stoppage losses in his career compared to 11 wins via stoppage. And he's 2-3 career to the decision. So more often than not, when the judges get involved, things do not go his way, but it's been a pretty small sample size. Overall, he does big, powerful damage. He can put guys away in round 1. He can put guys away in round 3. And that's what we love about Chris. So I think that, Chris, we wish him the best of luck. Chris Padilla sounds like a nice guy. I don't know the first thing about him. I got to watch the tape. I got to get educated. I got to get myself in line and really know what I'm dealing with. As for James Llontop, or James Llontop, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. He was on Contender Series last season, beat Malik Lewis, and that was a fine win. Malik Lewis, I want to say, was on the show twice. Let me just check that. Malik Lewis, unfortunately, 0-2 on the Contender Series, got beat by Trevor Peek, then lost a decision to Llontop. So Llontop is on a nice little win streak here. If we go look, he is on a 12-fight win streak heading into this contest. And, he's not really beating a lot of guys that you've heard of, but he beat Ranieri Zenadim. That's a fine win. And he also got the win that we're familiar with, right? The Malik Lewis win. So I'd say those are probably the 2 best wins that jump off the paper at me. Did a lot of FFC. What is that? Fury Fighting Championships. Let's see here. Fusion Fighting Championships. There it is. I was going to say, it didn't sound like Fury. But FFC, they could have had me fooled. So yeah, I think that Fusion Fighting Championships was a fine way for Llontop to get some experience. And, like I said, it was enough to beat Malik Lewis. But just seems to me like this fight's got a lot of unknowns. He was supposed to fight Lando Venata. Then he's supposed to fight Gabe Green. And now he's supposed to fight Chris Padilla. So it's been a whole shit show for Llontop. I'm just glad they can get him a fight. I hope everybody gets paid. I hope everybody has a blast. But what else can I really say about that fight? I don't know shit. The other thing is, shout out to the chat here, guys. Daz says, Caio fights like he wants it. Only reason I'm taking him, fuck Mays. That's fair play. Caio was like plus 150 opener on FanDuel. Now he's minus 140. Line completely swung. Fair enough. 5% of Tapology pickers have Padilla. I mean, this fight has only been announced for like 24 hours. I would wait for the sample size to develop a little bit there. Caio round 2 to 3 KO. Mays is uber level. Fair enough. Any idea why Caio started at such a dog price? Maybe they just thought Mays would have a little bit more name familiarity. Caio Machado's really only had 2 UFC fights, neither of them very high profile. That could be something to watch for. And Daz says, because it's like his second fight in the UFC, and I think he's coming off a loss. Yes, he did lose to Mick Parkin. Daz also says, you watched the Mays fight, and I swear it looks like he's play fighting. So there you have it. I think that this is a spot where we go and peel back the layers over on fightnumbers.com and we get the best available odds, guys. Plus 108 for Dante Lord Kong Mays. That's at Bet Online Sportsbook. And we're looking at Caio Machado minus 120. Pinnacle Sportsbook. That's the best you could do right now on Caio Machado. And you could have had plus 150, like B-Neg says last week. So, hey, hope you guys scooped whatever prices you're looking for. If you're waiting on the Dante Mays side, I'd say, hey, hold on and keep waiting because it looks like a lot of money is coming in on the favorite here, Caio Machado. And for me, I'm not laying, chalk in a heavyweight matchup like this, but I do think that Machado ever so slightly would get the lead for me as well. But now it's back to the action, guys. We got Ivana Petrovic taking on Na Liang. And Ivana Petrovic is a debutante, I believe, in this spot. Let me just confirm that. Actually, no, she lost to Luana Carolina in her UFC debut. She was a minus 225 favorite, guys. Came in as a big favorite, dropped the ball. And Luana Carolina has made a habit of coming through in those decision spots as an underdog. She's 10-4 in the UFC. And she was able to finish Julija Stoliarenko last time out. She beat Ivana Petrovic. She beat Lubi Godinez. She beat Poliana Botello. So she's done quite a good job of maximizing her skills and her gifts inside the UFC. I didn't expect much from Luana Carolina. But in any case, right, this girl kind of came in with a lot of hype, a lot of acclaim, a lot of expectations, and then she falls short right away against Luana Carolina. Now they give her Na Liang, and Na Liang is on a 3-fight skid within the promotion, right? She just has a very hard time getting a win under her belt. She's 0-3 with the UFC. Last fight under contract, they typically sign a 4-fight deal. So it's a make or break fight for Na Liang. It's a huge fight for her career. And she's got 4 losses via KO or TKO, 2 losses via submission. So she's a typical kill or be killed fighter. She's got 17 wins inside the distance. So 17-6 record to fights that end inside the distance. That's not too shabby for our girl Na Liang. The problem is she got knocked out in the first round by Silvana Gomez Juarez. She got ground and pounded out of there by JJ Aldrich after she gassed out. She got ground and pounded out of there by Ariane Carnellosi after she gassed out. She got beat by Kiwi Yan, the aforementioned, via armbar, in the second round. She got TKO'd in the first round by Maria Agapova, of all people. She lost to Juliana Velasquez in Bellator in the second round back in the day. So she's not lost to a bunch of bums. She's just lost, pretty widely to a bunch of different styles. She's mostly gotten beaten up on the ground. So then the question becomes, is Ivana Petrovic going to take this fight to the ground? And if so, what can she do with that, control? Because she is 2-0 career to the submission. She is 3-0 career to the knockout. So she's never been finished in pro MMA, but she's a 50-50 fighter so far when the fight goes to the cards. And we actually saw her lose a amateur decision as well to Charlie Crochet back on the amateur regional scene back in 2019. So I think that we've seen Ivana Petrovic has skills, but she's just 6-1 as a professional, 0-1 in the UFC from Aries FC, still has a lot to prove. Meanwhile, you've got the younger fighter here in Na Liang. She's got way more professional experience. I'm talking about more than 3x the professional experience of her opponent in Petrovic here. And so it feels to me like, you've got 2 women of similar size, similar age, but the younger girl here is Na Liang. And then on top of that, Na Liang has, a bunch of wins, none of them at the UFC level, but she's fought fairly solid UFC opposition and not been able to break through the hump. We have seen her go out there and not beat any good opponents basically throughout her career. And I think the same is largely true of Petrovic, right? It's like virtually anonymous names you've never heard of. So for me, it just seems to me like there's a lot of assumptions being made. I would favor Petrovic in this fight, but I just think that, she's being favored, like she's the second coming, like she's a great fighter. And I think she's a very average fighter. So for me, I'll go back and watch the tape. I'll do my due diligence here, but it'd be hard for me to imagine playing the favorite under any circumstance in that fight. I think it's a clear dog or pass, but Na Liang does not inspire great confidence. She's not a very good fighter, but still, it's like, how wrong could you be? The refuge of the underdog better. I think that's a real question to ask when you're dealing with a kind of fight like this, low-level women's MMA early on in the card, and somebody's minus XXX, it seems a little bit presumptuous to me. But last but not least, guys, we got there. We got to the final fight that we have to discuss, guys. We have Mahashate back in action, taking on Mowgli Gabriel Benitez. And Mahashate is a fighter that, has a 9-3 professional record. Big KO wins, right? Put Steve Garcia down and out badly. But we've also seen the big losses, right? Got finished badly by Vyacheslav Borashev. Looked like he had nothing for him. Borashev was several steps ahead, smarter, faster, more technical, knew what he wanted. And then Rafa Garcia went out there and, we saw a weight miss for Mahashate, and then he got dogged out despite that, with the wrestling, with the grappling, with the pace. And that was a little bit disappointing. So now he comes in here as a -200 favorite after being a underdog 3 fights in a row in the UFC. And I do have to ask myself a little bit why, Mahashate was a massive underdog against Achilles Estremadura on the Contender Series, and he was able to get the win there. So he beats him. He beats Steve Garcia. He's a +1 XX dog there. Then he goes out there and beats, loses to Rafa Garcia as a +120 underdog. Then he goes out there and loses to Vyacheslav Borashev as a +130 underdog. So we've seen Mahashate has been a dog, and now he's favored -200 to win this fight. Holy shit. They really got to see something here for our guy Mahashate. But then on the other side, I think that Gabriel Mowgli Benitez is mostly Shate, right? As opposed to Mahashate, he's mostly Shate. And, he's not that old, right? You look, he's 35 years of age. I just think he's been through the ringer, man. That Jim Miller fight was very concerning. You just look at that Jim Miller fight. I thought Mowgli looked slow. I thought he looked hittable. I thought he looked fugazi on the mat compared to Jim Miller. I thought Jim Miller looked a lot better than him. Beating Charlie Ontiveros tells me literally nothing. I parlayed many, many units on Kevin Holland -700 against Charlie Ontiveros. I thought that was, about as straightforward as it gets in mixed martial arts. Size, strength, willingness to win, just a lot of different factors there. He got TKO'd by David Onama in the very first round. That was a fight in which Mowgli came in over the contracted limit. So he used to be fighting at 145 pounds. He's moved up to 155 pounds, and then he's losing to the elder statesman of the division, Jim Miller. I mean, you look 35 years old for Mowgli against 40-year-old Jim Miller, and he got embarrassed in that fight, largely speaking. He got finished in that fight as well. So I haven't been inspired by these looks from Mowgli lately. I thought the Billy Q fight was horrific, right? Like, Billy Q is a good fighter, but the way he was able to get that stoppage, it was like a pity stoppage from the referee because he was beating his ass so bad from the back mount. That's not a great look. I thought that he showed a lot of signs of wilting there, but if we just separate out, the nice guy, the fun guy, the crazy brawler, Mowgli Benitez, I'm just going to make a simple list for you of all of his UFC wins since 2016, right? Because we'll give him the credit. He beat Clay Collard back in 2015, and that was a great win. But now let's go through his record of wins since then, right? We'll leave the losses to the side for a second. Sam Sicilia, he beat via guillotine choke in 2016. He decisioned Jason Knight in 2017. He slam knocked out Humberto Bondanai in 2018. He beat Justin James with a knee to the body in 2020, and he beat Charlie Ontiveros via ground and pound in 2022. Those are all of his UFC wins since 2015. What's the standout win? What's the best win of the bunch? Jason Knight? It's just really not been a quality level of opposition. Then on the other side, how's he been losing? He got head kicked and knocked out by Andre Fili. Andre Fili is not known for being a prolific knockout artist. Sadiq Youssef knocked him out with a counter right hand, dropped him, put him down with ground and pound, finished him. Enrique Barzola decisioned him. Omar Morales, the not very good Omar Morales, with all due respect, Omar Morales, very average fighter in my view, decisioned him, even though Gabriel Benitez had, 3x the professional experience. Billy Quarantillo beat the piss out of him, even though Gabriel Benitez had more experience. David Onama knocked him out brutally in a fight that was kind of back and forth, but again, just left a lot to be desired. And then Jim Miller, who just got absolutely woodshedded by Bobby Green. was out there looking very good against Mowgli. So I think Mowgli is a little bit past his sell by date. He's 7-7 in the promotion with 5 losses inside the distance, including his most recent bout. He's lost 3 of his last 4 fights inside the distance. He has not beaten a quality fighter, I would argue, since Jason Knight in 2017. So for me, I think the wheels have fallen off for Mowgli Benitez. And I think that despite the price being prohibitive, I have a feeling Mahashate is going to brutally knock this guy out. So give me Mahashate here. But I do think that we could see Mahashate's grappling get exposed. I do think Mahashate's grappling is not very good. He's 1-0 career to the submission, but I definitely think we could see, him get exploited one time when he's not fighting a pace wrestler like a Rafa Garcia or a fellow striker like Vyacheslav Borishev. I think that we could definitely see Mahashate get put into a bad situation on the ground. Shout out to the chat here, guys. Only Na Liang has ever been serenaded by MMA cappers. Na Liang, round 1 or bust. I think that's probably fair. Benitez just doesn't have the goods. Let the boy get a pay raise by going to the PFL. I don't even know if it'd be a pay raise, bro. I don't know that he's got any chance of winning the tournament, honestly. Daz Dillinger says, Shate, a big motherfucker. Yeah, he's huge for the division. I agree with you. Also, Mahashate big for the division against Mowgli, who's a former featherweight. We got to keep that in mind. Gabriel's on his way out. I tend to agree, Daz. And Shate throws a lot of teep kicks. Pretty sure I've seen Gabriel drop by body shots. Man's got no abs. There you have it. So Daz with the little inside baseball Mowgli Benitez body shot counter. That's a show. We've got 2 hours in the books. It is 3:16 local time. I want to say a couple things here, guys. A little bit of housekeeping. First of all, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to the sharpest chat in the game. If there wasn't a sharp chat, it'd just be me talking to myself like a crazy person in here. I appreciate you guys showing up for the show. I appreciate you guys putting up with the technical difficulties. I appreciate you guys that rock with me and contribute. The show would not be the same if it was a monologue. I like having this conversation with you guys. I like all the people that contribute in the chat. I know it's a little late. It's past some people's bedtime. The conversation's not over, my friends. Go ahead and hit me up in that comment section down below. Say, hey, Liam, I got these thoughts. Hey, Liam, what do you think of this bet? Hey, Liam, what do you think of these picks? Anything like that, I'll try and get back to you guys. I'll try and answer you guys, give you guys some thoughts, some feedback. Timestamps are a priority for me this week. I want to get that done. Podcast, I want to get this put out on audio as quickly as possible for you guys as well. If you guys don't mind, a couple quick favors I'd like to ask of you. Before you get out of here today, drop a like on the video. If you guys watch this on Twitter, hey, appreciate you over there. But if you don't mind, get subscribed on YouTube. I do content like this all the time. I appreciate the support, trying to put out educational, informative content, have fun conversations, but also put you in a position to profit and succeed on these fights. What I can't do is snake oil sell you that we're going to win every week. We never lose. We're fucking perfect. We're geniuses. Everything we say is right. Nobody else is as good as us. That's what a lot of people like to do. That's not my style. What I'll tell you is listen to other analysts. There's a lot you can learn from people that are not named Liam. Go out there, do your own work, do your own research, do your own due diligence. Make sure that if I say something and you want to follow, that your analysis lines up with it. You agree with me. But here's the other thing, guys. I try and put people in a position to know, hey, this is what he's doing. This is why he's doing it. This is the rationale. This is the long-term approach, because that's what I'm really doing. I'm really putting my, positions together. I'm really placing my bets. I design rationales for the plays, long written out, 1 to 9 reasons why I think that the play is worth taking. And then you can choose for yourself whether you agree or disagree. I put out resources as well on a weekly basis. That's part of the reason for the delay of this show, right? I had a little bit of technical difficulties setting up tonight, but also I wanted to make sure that on the Patreon, we had access to fighter notes, access to some of the proprietary information, the social media A size, a couple of the things like that, the previous performance and odds range. That's what I'm going to be working on when I get off here tonight. So the grind never stops. There's plenty more work still to be done. I want to let you guys know and put it on your radar. Thursday, Bets and Banter. If you're new here, once again, thank you so much. Welcome aboard. Drop the like, get subscribed. But Thursday, we're coming back to do it all again. We're talking about the card from the bottom of the card all the way on up. We're talking about it with a very sharp guest, and we're doing it with a lot of research already in the can. So we will have clear thoughts, picks, rationale, try and get some betting advice, and we'll have a lot more lines to break down as well. Right now, early in the week, we don't have the props. We don't have some of the things that we want to discuss later on in the week. So we don't want to mush the markets. We want to let things develop. We want to let the market start to take shape. And then we'll come back on Thursday and discuss it all again. So I want to say thank you all so much. God bless you all. I hope that you guys enjoy the fights. Again, questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the comments section down below. If you need anything more from me, you can find me everywhere at Liam Picks Fights. That's on Twitter. That's on Instagram. That's on podcast platforms. Everywhere you're looking for me, you can find me there. Thank you guys so much. Come back next time. We're having all the same fun again. Thanks, everybody.